The only thing more fun than making a tiny dress for a tiny toy bunny is making a tiny, historically accurate dress for said bunny. And today we get to do just that. I had so much fun researching and planning out this Regency era inspired outfit, and while the final gown isn't exactly historically accurate, I believe it retains the most important aspects of Jane Austen fashion, while still allowing the sewists to retain their wits about them while sewing. You'll see a little bit more what I mean as I describe my process. As always, I went the lazy route and just did a Google search to see what Regency era bunnies wore. And I laughed out loud when Google started autofilling my question. Apparently, people have already searched for what Regency era bunnies wore, what they did, or what they ate. Piece of cake, I thought. We have all the answers right here. But actually, upon further review, most of the bunnies shown in these Google searches were a little bit closer to Victorian era bunnies, so it's still kind of on my own. I decided that I need to do a little bit of my own research for these Regency era bunnies. Specifically, I wanted to learn a little bit more about these dresses that they wore. An article written in 1811 under the pen name A Lady of Distinction noted, in the morning, the arms and bosom should be completely covered to the throat and wrists. From the dinner hour to the termination of the day, the arms, to a graceful height above the elbow, may be bare, and the neck and shoulders unveiled as far as delicacy will allow. A lady of distinction also advised young ladies to wear softer shades of color such as pinks, periwinkle blue, or lilacs. The mature matron could wear fuller colors such as purple, black, crimson, deep blue, or yellow. Because I always go over the top with projects, I initially wanted to just take a historically accurate pattern and just modify it so it was tiny. But when I was looking at all of the pieces that were involved in a more accurate representation of these gowns, the simple truth was that shrinking them down to a 4-inch sized gown would create some issues. Not to mention the fact that the bunny, it's not exactly an accurate representation of the human form. So taking a pattern made for the human form and putting it on this bunny, which is not actually the form of a human, wasn't going to work that great. I realized there would have to be a lot of simplifying involved. We definitely needed the empire waistline. The skirt definitely needed to be floor length. I always loved those little puffed short sleeves. I know that they wore longer sleeves in the daytime, but I just always loved those puffed short sleeves. Now, a lady of distinction taught me that when they're wearing the puffed short sleeves, they would also have a lower neckline. This started to pose a bit of a problem as I was designing our dress. A lower neckline would be adorable. However, going back to the fact that our bunny doesn't actually have an accurate representation of the human form, our bunny does not have a bust. And so making the lower neckline just ended up looking funny. So I went with the higher neckline of the day dress and the short sleeves of the evening wear, even though that's not historically accurate for people. Again, we're doing it for a bunny. I tried out a few different versions of this dress, just pattern piece wise. First, I did a more complicated version with quite a few little pieces. And I got frustrated working with the little pieces, which I should not have been surprised about. So then I went on the total opposite end of the spectrum, and I did a very, very simple version where it was essentially one piece of fabric that you hemmed and gathered in certain spots And that actually worked okay, but it was lacking structural definition. I wanted it to be a little bit more delicate and accurate than that ended up being. So I ended up kind of in the middle. I felt pretty good with that. Once I got the shapes I wanted, I sewed up one dress in a light gauzy fabric, kind of like the cotton muslin that was described in the Regency era. I got halfway through this dress and I wanted to throw my sewing machine out the window. Instead, I started sewing in a lightweight quilting cotton, and it worked okay. The fabric was really stable while I worked with it, even though they were small pieces, and I loved that. The final product was a little bit stiffer than I wanted it to be. It didn't hang the way that a Regency era dress should. It kind of poofed out like an A-line dress. I did find that if I ironed it, and while the dress was still warm from the iron, if I wrung it out kind of like I was trying to squeeze water out of it, then it wouldn't bell out at the bottom as much. It would hang straighter, and that I liked a lot better. So the shape and the way that it hung was okay, but it still didn't give the final effect that I wanted. We're doing aristocratic bunnies, and these dresses looked a little bit more like what maybe the maid would wear. I wanted something that had a more delicate fabric and would look a little bit higher class. So I went through my fabric stash to see what I could find. I ended up with two options, both of which turned out lovely. The first, I used a very wide lace, and I cut out each piece of the dress from this lace, and then I also cut out a lining of quilting cotton. By having the cotton under the lace, I still had that stability I needed to work with those small pieces and get the arms sewn on correctly. But at the same time, the lace is more transparent and a little fancier looking. The final dress ended up looking very delicate and fancy, and I really love the result of it. I think it looks very aristocratic bunny. The second option, it was still 100% cotton, but I didn't use a quilting cotton. I actually used an old shirt. As a side note, as I've been filming this project, as I make it, I'm realizing that I reuse a lot of old clothes as I sew, which is maybe kind of weird. I didn't really realize how often I did it until I started documenting it and then putting it out for everyone to see. But I guess the simple truth is I just make a lot of things out of old clothes. I often find that the details that were sewn into my article of clothing can add a little extra something to the project that I'm working on. And this is actually a fantastic example of that. The shirt that I used to make the second dress was an old blouse that I had that had kind of some heirloom type pin tucking along the front of the shirt. I was able to take the dress pieces and fussy cut them on my old shirt so that the bottom of the front of the dress and the bottom of the back of the dress had pin tucking. So it was as if the hem of the dress was pin tucked. And I loved that I got the detail of pin tucking without having to do those tiny pin tucks on these teeny tiny pieces. And I also loved that I didn't have to buy any fabric, and I got to reuse something to make a beautiful item. After all that trial and error, I ended up with quite a few of these little gowns. A few of them look a little bit more like maybe what the maid might wear, and it made me think maybe we need to have a kitchen to have some kitchen maids working in our house when we get to the point where we are making our little room pages. I I really loved how the two fancier gowns ended up, the lace and the pin-tucked gown. I love that they're the lighter colors, which is more like the aristocratic women wore in the Regency era. I think the puffed sleeves worked really well. I think that that higher neck is going to help it fit on the doll a little better and help it just stay in place as the doll is played with. So while design-wise, I would have loved to have a deeper neckline, I think that functionality-wise, this high neckline is the right choice. I did really love being able to add some decorative silk ribbons to each of these gowns. It was fun to be able to pick out different colors, and I have saved scraps of each of these ribbons so that when I get to the point of making bonnets and shawls, I can add coordinating ribbons to the accessories, because these bunnies will definitely need coordinating accessories. If you'd like to make your own Regency era bunny gown, stay tuned, because next week the full tutorial will be available on sweetbriersisters.com. And if you'd like to make your own mini bunny doll, you can also find that free pattern on sweetbriersisters.com as well. As always, we love sharing free patterns and tutorials, but we can only do it with your support. Please, please, please consider liking this video and subscribing so that you can hear about all of our new sewing adventures and so that you can support us so we can keep posting them.